Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Shady Youth Podcast, the best podcast in the world. I only say that, so it doesn't really matter. But we have an amazing guest today. I say this about every single one of my guests because every single one of my guests is amazing, and especially this one right here because he's an incredible gem in the community of ours. He's a doctor, so he's saving lives, and he took time out of his incredibly busy schedule to finally sit down with me and have a chat and basically, just talk about COVID, talk about health issues, talk about his life in general. Enough with the flattery. Let's introduce Dr. Minhaz. How are you doing, bro?
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm good. What about you?
Alhamdulillah, man. It's been dope. It's really funny that for every single episode that I've been using like COVID as just like a little like conversation starter because it's the easiest thing that you can use.
Yeah.
Literally just like, but you're an actual doctor, so this actually applies. So I can actually like use it without just making it like fluff talk in the beginning.
Yeah, it can be actually like pretty relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, we're not gonna talk too extensively on it because it's July right now. It's pretty much like not the trendy thing to talk about now. I'm probably the last one to like make a video on it, so I won't like bore the audience with too much of that. But the last few months have obviously been hectic for you, right? With the whole situation with you started your residency this year, right? So as soon as you started, you were like jam packed right into that. How's that been for you, man?
It was interesting, man. Like, so I actually started last year, 2019 July. So that's when I began like residency, and I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I began residency just like anyone else. But then come like March, even in the early phases when people were talking about COVID in like some of the other countries, we didn't think it was going to become something crazy. We didn't think it was going to come here and cause a whole pandemic and everything. I knew some people that were like, yeah, man, this thing's going to stop. And like, cases here, and the instant that the cases started over here, like New York City was like a wildfire, man. Like like hospitals, like they just could not handle it. Like especially like over here, Elmhurst was one of the hospitals that got hit real hard.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah. And then I was working at the Brooklyn Veterans Hospital at that time. So I rotate through 3 different hospitals, and I was there. And they had turned that hospital into a COVID center. So all the patients that we were getting were going to be COVID. And we were getting transfers. We were getting transfers from other hospitals of patients that were COVID. And I was actually on night shift this one time. They actually got, usually it's 2 of us, 2 residents who work the nights. They got a 3rd resident to come and help us, right? So it was 3 of us there. And, I remember this one night we got slammed, man. We got a total of like 16 patients overnight, which is insane. Like usually in that hospital, you get like 3, 4, maybe 5 patients overnight at worst. But we got 16 with all the transfers and new admissions. And it was bad. The ICUs are filling up and everything. But I think that my hospital handled it pretty well. I had enough, by the time I was there, I had enough protective equipment to keep myself protected. And just going through all of that was crazy because I was working on the floors. And then right after that, I had an ICU shift. So then I was in the ICU for like 2 weeks. And then I had a break for 2 weeks of clinic. And then I was back in the ICU again. And so I saw like COVID like happening in the ICU setting. And I saw like the transition from like the midway point when it was crazy to like when it was slowly starting to like settle down, and we saw people like getting out of the ICU and stuff. But it was just data on like the disease was evolving every like week. My attendings, my supervisors would come in, and they would come in with like new information. Like everyone would just like find out something new about the virus, some new way that it's like attacking the body. And it was just, we had to keep up and also, just hold our ground with everything that was happening. But
I mean, that's why it's called the novel coronavirus, right? Because it's like new,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
No one really knows much about it.
Exactly. Novel 2009. Funny, it's 2019 because I think the first cases came out in December of 2019, but it didn't really spread until later, until like this year.
Yeah, no, I remember because I work as a medical assistant at an urgent care, and I remember like all the providers there were just talking about it like in December and stuff,
Yeah.
and yeah, like I just I didn't think it was gonna be that big a deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, I remember there's one provider in John. He's a PA,
Mhm.
and he has a very thick Russian accent, right? So from like I think like late November was when like China like had like the rising rates of like COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and from that point he was just like, yo, this is gonna be like the apocalypse, like we got to get ready, like
Oh,
and this is like in a heavy thick Russian accent. So
yeah.
it was really funny because I would he'd be there on weekends, right? And I would work weekends because of college and stuff.
Mhm.
So he would be there, and and he's such a funny guy because he kind of just exaggerates everything. So
Mhm.
we like in between patients, he would like pull me in. He's like, boss, close the door. And so I close the door, and then he's like, come over here. And then I come over there. I thought he like wanted me to like do something with the patient or some other thing. And he was
Yeah.
like, did you see this? And I was like, what are you showing me? And then he
Mhm.
like just shows me some random like news thing from China about
Yeah.
the coronavirus and like how it's like making people like throw up organs and stuff like that. I was just like seriously, we got like five patients waiting. You're like doing this, but yeah, he took it super seriously,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was definitely right about just like the effect that it had because
Yeah.
it was definitely like it had such a tremendous effect. Like I'm sure 7 months ago, like people didn't know like how much of a threat it would be,
No.
right?
Yeah.
And
No, for sure. People were just not aware of like where this thing was gonna go. And then even like while it was getting bad here in New York City, like some of the other states weren't taking it as seriously.
mm-hmm,
See the numbers starting to rise in some of like the southern states and towards the west as well. Um, but I mean, New York City is an urban center. We get hit with everything like pretty badly. We take it, we face it, we get out of it, and then I guess we're an example for kind of like the
yeah,
rest of like the United States. But at this point, like I think we've learned a decent amount about the virus from a hospital setting. There's always unexpected things that happen, but we have an idea of how to manage anyone with it. Obviously, we're not going to manage. I mean, we're not as advanced in managing the patients as we are with like other diseases. You know, like this is like a very new disease,
mm-hmm.
but the data has evolved pretty quickly, and we've been able to adjust with time. It's still pretty dangerous. I know cases around the world are like still like increasing, and people are still dying out there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like New York, it seems like it's dwindling down, right? Like it seems like it's getting a lot better.
Yeah,
But places like Florida and like Texas, their rates are still skyrocketing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Especially recently.
yeah. I know.
So you just finished medical school like last year, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, Obviously, the shift between like school in general and like working in the actual career that you studied for is like
yeah,
two different worlds for any given career, right? But you went from like I guess a controlled like school types, and well obviously the last 2 years are rotations, right? So you get some experience, but you were kind of just like plunged into like COVID, right?
yeah.
So that must have been like just a steep learning curve right there.
Yeah, yeah, no. Even the entire like first year of residency is a learning curve in and of itself. Even if COVID did it wasn't like a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of us experience this, and everyone that goes through medical school and residency has the same kind of experience. And medical school feels like school, especially for the first 2 years. Still feels like school. You're going home, you're reading your books, you're studying for your exams. Same kind of thing that you've been doing throughout, like your middle school, high school, and college years. Third and fourth year, a little bit more clinical oriented. You know, you dip your feet into what's happening, but I mean, you don't really like you do get involved with the patients, but you're not, you know, you still have like your resident to fall back on and everything like that. And what it's still as a third and fourth year medical student, your priorities are you passing your shelf exams and, you know, going back home and studying from the books. Residency is different in that, like, you're really in, like you're really, in the water, and you're trying to swim, you're learning how to swim, and you're seeing the patients, you're assessing the patients. Yes, you do have like an attending physician that's supervising you, but at the same time, you're doing the bulk of the work, and you really need to put yourself in that position of, you being the doctor. It's your decisions that, you know, sway like how the patient will do, especially when you're there overnight, and sometimes you may not have as much supervision from an attending physician. Although you can always call them, you still make like minor decisions regarding things, and so the decisions really start kicking in, and you slowly take on this role of being the doctor. And it's a transition from the transition from from my last day of medical school to my first day as a resident wasn't like it's just a night difference. I'm not a different person. But the transition from the first day of residency until now, I just started my second year of residency July 1st of this year.
Mm.
So that transition is big, and then sometimes I don't realize how big it is, but it is something. And once you get into whatever field it is, whether it's medicine, anything else, where requires sort of like hands-on like work or decision making, you truly feel like what the field is like, you know and that's kind of that's pretty much the transition. It's not so much me coming back home worrying about, hey, I have to study like this chapter of this book, and then, oh my god, and like in like 4 weeks I have this exam and I need to cover like these topics, otherwise I'm gonna do bad on the exam. Like that's not what's stressing me out. Like I come home, I study what I need to, whatever's relevant to my patients that are in the hospital. I try and improve myself on a personal basis, and everyone does it differently. Some people come home, read, some people do questions, some people watch videos, but you kind of develop your own style, and your priority becomes more taking care of the patients and sort of following them
Gotcha. So
along.
how are the hours like for residency? Because I
Oh,
know everyone talks about like the horrifying like 80-hour work weeks, right? So is that actually true, or is it like not as bad as people make it out to be?
it's not as bad. The residency programs have been getting better with time. I would say like 10, 15 years ago, it was bad. There was no limit to how many hours that you could work in like a day,
Mm,
in a week. Now there's like something called duty hours. We're not allowed to work more than, what is it, like 80 hours in a week. On top of that, I would say on average, I work around 65 hours per week. If I were to, take the hours in. So that's
that's
kind of,
still a lot.
yeah, but we do get like a lot of programs, especially for internal medicine. You get several weeks of working in the hospital, and then you get 1 or 2 weeks of working in a clinic, and that's kind of like your time. You still have to work, but it's not as intense as working in the hospital setting. But 65 hours a week, that's how it is. It's just,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was talking to one of the providers at the place I work, and he was talking about how he worked for like 14 years in a hospital.
yeah,
And then he was just like, bro, I just needed to chill at some point. Like
yeah,
I just need to chill.
yeah,
And I guess like I didn't think like our setting was that chill, but I guess compared to like a hospital setting where
yeah,
patients are literally coming in and out, then that's comparing to that, it's probably a lot more just relaxed.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Once you see the different places, you can tell what's relaxed, what's not.
How are the 24-hour shifts? Like, how do you deal with that? Because
I
you're
mean,
you're not even sleeping for like a full day, right?
yeah, but it depends. It really depends on how the day goes. A lot of the 24-hour shifts that we have, they accommodate us. We're given like a room with like a bed and like a computer,
Oh,
and like, so we do get a chance to sleep. Obviously, if there's like a lot of patients, if there's things going on, the nurses will call me, tell me to like come in and like assist with whatever, or make a decision regarding whatever needs to be done. But otherwise, if it's a chill night, and there's not much going on, patients are stable, it's a chill night for me too. So I mean, if we get our work done well in the daytime, usually the nights are nice, unless something unexpected happens. But
do you actually get sleep, or is it just like a 30-minute nap or something?
it depends. I mean, this was the first time I ever did, like, I did like three 24-hour shifts. The first night I had to, like, my sleep was kind of broken. I did like 2.5, and then another 2.5. I had a patient
Hmm.
that came in overnight. Um, and then my second 24 hours, I kind of just ended up staying awake just because I didn't feel like sleeping. And then I slept a little bit later in the morning. for about like 3 hours. And then the last night that I had, I only had one patient. She was stable. Whatever I had to do for her, I did it like earlier in the evening. And so I was able to sleep for a decent, like maybe about like 5 to 6 hours. So I got a good,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So with all that craziness going on,
Yeah.
what made you think that you wanted to add on another like burden on your shoulders, like a full on YouTube channel? Okay, let me comment on this phenomena first. I've seen like in the past few years, it seems like anyone that gets
Yeah.
into med school just starts a YouTube channel.
It's not everyone. It's like, it's a tax on time. I would tell
Right.
you. When I did start, I had to, it was a lot more work than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure like we're doing your channel right here. Like I'm pretty sure it's a lot more work than like what other people see it to be. When you watch a video, especially when you watch a good video on YouTube, um, you
No,
don't.
yours are actually good. It's not just recording on a camera with like sitting and talking to the camera for like 10 minutes. You actually have like graphics and stuff, like statistics going on and like different camera angles and stuff. Like it seems like you put a lot into the editing aspect as well.
It's important. I mean, in all honesty, like it's not me who does the editing. I honestly
Oh,
don't have time for that. It's my wife that does all of these editing
oh man.
thing. So she'll like I'll record it and I'll have it done, and then she'll take it and then she'll put like the editing to the max and she'll do all that stuff. That's why the quality comes out like that. If I had to take my time out to do that, I couldn't survive. Like I have residency. I'm like trying to like come up with topics to record. Um, my last video was some time ago, and I haven't like made one because things got like very busy towards the end of the last year of like residency. But I have some topics in mind that I want to like sort of start back up at some point. But yeah, the editing, man, I can't like that's not it's not a one man team out here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, that's actually revelation. I didn't know your wife helped out. I
Yeah.
mean, like in the beginning, I guess I could like hear her like setting up the camera, right? She was also helping with that.
Yeah, I mean, she did. I mean, I don't know. I tried cropping like random things out, but I think so. So the thing is, yeah. Usually, like she has a better phone than me. I use her phone
Mm,
to record. I did buy like this light that helps with it's a lot of like camera angle, light angle, and all these things. I'm very technical about these things,
right.
right? So that's why like I get into it, and then she helps me set that up, kind of put me in like the right position to make a decent video. You know what I'm saying?
How do you balance a full on marriage doing like these crazy like 65 hours is still a lot of hours.
Yeah, I know.
And obviously once you come home you just want to sleep, you're exhausted.
Yeah,
And like you're still like this is the like you just ended your first full year of marriage, right? Your wedding was last year,
yeah,
2019.
yeah,
So how did that go? Because you were in residency.
yeah. So I mean, like, so my actual nikah was in March, and then like the walima was in June.
Okay.
So I did have a decent amount of time, like several months during the end of my fourth year of medical school, that I had a lot of time to sort of that I spent with my wife, and it was good quality time. And that was the time that we really like developed like our relationship in the early phases. And I guess some people would call it like the honeymoon stage or whatever, right? But that was a really good like time, and I really enjoyed that, and it'll be like very memorable, like you know moving forward. But and so that's when we established like our relationship, and the relationship grew over time. And as residency started, I mean, my wife knows how hard residency can be. Her brother's a resident himself.
Oh man.
Yeah. So he's like a year ahead of me. So she's seen him go through like the whole like process. Well, still going through the process right now. So she knew what was coming. I told her, listen, we're going to spend a lot of time now, right before I start residency. But once residency starts, I don't know how much time I'm going to have. But it becomes like a balancing act. Not every day is the same. I try and take out time, do something, simple but special, couple times a week, like I try to spend that time with my wife. Also, I spend time, for my own self to just study and learn. And then just, you need time for yourself too. You know what I'm saying? Like after work, you want to just sit down, watch like a show that you like. I've been watching Girl. I don't know if you know,
Hey. No,
right?
no, I don't watch it, but
Yeah,
Rifat watches it.
yeah.
Bro, he watched like the full season in like a month, and
Yeah,
it's like 80 episodes per season.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was binge watching during like the end of like med school. Like I had nothing to do. I just binge watched, but then I ended up like stopping it halfway. So I restarted like watching it. I'm on like what am I? I'm on like midway season 4.
Oh
Almost.
shoot.
Yeah, yeah, man. I'm getting towards the end. I like it. It's nice, and that's like kind of like my escape from everything. You know, it's just like me time when I watch the show. So that's
Is
pretty cool.
it is okay, so is it historically accurate? Is that why you like it, or is it just like the Game of Thrones like dramatic medieval twist on it?
I would say it's a combination of like all of that, right? So yeah, the whole Game of Thrones and all that, like the action, you know, like I'm all about that, you know, and I watch it for that. But then there's all these like plot twists and politics and so many things that are involved in like you know their setup of like the tribes and the state that are just it's interesting to me to see that, right? But also there's some inspirations, there's some Islamic inspiration in there that I take from and that I like. Um, One of my favorite characters, if anyone watches this video, like my favorite character in the show is Ibn Arabi. He's like
Oh, bro,
the
I've heard things about him.
yeah, he's like the right? He's like my favorite character.
He's like a wizard, right?
Yeah, he's amazing. He pops in at the right moment, and he'll always like reference like a hadith or something like that, and he'll always bring reminders and like uplift everyone's spirits, and it's just nice. You know what I'm saying? So I like it for that, and then it's just in terms of historical accuracy. So like I actually looked into it, right? There isn't much historical like text or like anything really about Ertugrul himself. I mean, there's stuff about his son who started the Ottoman Empire, but there isn't much about him. Like the show gave life to to the historical figure. Um, all that's known is just general like pieces of information, like different like things that happen along the timeline, and it is pretty accurate in terms of how the politics in the government has worked. So it's a good mix of like everything.
I've heard it's just it's kind of like Turkish propaganda. Would you say it's that?
I guess in a sense it can be, you know, if the government is leaning towards, you know, like, but then, I mean, it revitalizes people's, cause Turkey's been through a lot, you know, if you look into the history, like they've had their moment, their ups and downs. If you look at it from an Islamic perspective, I mean, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but I could see it as something that they started in order to like, I guess revive the people's spirit, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Well, speaking of the Muslim community, right? Um, one aspect that always intrigues me is like just the vast amount of like health problems that we have, because
Yeah.
like bro, every single one of us has like a grandparent or a parent that has diabetes, high blood
Yeah.
pressure, or cholesterol, if not all three, right?
Yeah.
um and at work I see it too. Like, well, it's mostly like it's mostly like African Americans that come into like the area that I work in,
Mhm.
but even then, like I guess like people of color in general just have these same health problems, like just linking together, right? So is there like something that isn't like the diet, or something about like where they live, like location wise, to like specific things, like what is it that just, well, my question kind of has two parts, right? So the first part is why like our community, like the brown Muslim community, how come that has like such a strong like leaning towards the same exact health problems over and over again, like high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol? And the
Yeah.
second part of the question is kind of um like other immigrant communities and like people of color, they kind of have like the same problems as well. Are those linked as well, or is it, do they have their own separate set of issues?
I think those three things, diabetes, high cholesterol, and blood pressure, hypertension, these things are very common within the United States like population. I don't think it's really like based on race. I've seen like brown people, I've seen like people of color, I've seen like white people, like everyone like has these things. Very common here, especially with the reason being, um, one of the things you don't really see or isn't that common here in the United States is malnutrition. But the one thing that is common is obesity, right?
Right.
It's it's the excess amount of food, a lot of the empty calories that we eat, a lot of the sugar. It can exacerbate diabetes.
The
Diabetes,
portions themselves are just bigger, right? Like in
exactly.
terms of like compared to other countries.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like over here, it's just mean, capitalism drives everything, right? So, if I'm like a food or like a fast food chain or something like that, like I want to give my customers what they want, like, so I'm going to pack, sugar and salt and all that, salt, like if you have excess salt in your diet, that will raise your, um, blood pressure levels. If you have like excess sugar and you already have like diabetes, that's not good for you. You should cut down on the sugars. Um, people, so these three things, cholesterol, diabetes, and hypertension, they can be managed pretty well with medication and diet and lifestyle modifications. The first thing we always go to is diet and lifestyle modifications. If those things don't work, then you go to medications, right? Now, the thing is, I think there may be like a lack of education within our communities, or to the point where, like, people just don't want to take care of themselves. If people don't take care of themselves, like as like doctors, physicians, like we can try our best to like aid people along. But if people really don't want to take care of themselves or don't understand why they're taking the medications they're taking, or like the long-term effects of these diseases, then they won't, manage it properly. Diabetes can be managed properly if you take your medications, or if you just change your diet, you can manage that. Blood pressure can be managed with medications and diet, right? What else? Cholesterol. Once again, back to diet. Like you shouldn't be eating like a lot of ice cream and like red meats and all that stuff. Um, and then if you need, then to take like a cholesterol lowering medication. These things they're very well managed if you take the right steps. And so the problem is, people maybe not being aware of the right steps, or not having enough education to take the right steps.
Well, okay, so diet and lifestyle, I guess people kind
Yeah.
of treat as more of a trendy type thing, right? So they'll be like, for these 3 months, I'll like do like keto, or like
Yeah.
get remove like all rice, or just do like, oh, I'll be vegetarian for like this X amount of time. But someone once told me that once you get into like a diet, you can't just go from like 0 to 100 real quick. You have to like slowly wean off things, because your ultimate goal is for that to last a whole lifetime, like, right?
Exactly.
So it like, what's one example of something that we can like cut off slowly, like little by little, and then eventually get rid of like a whole toxic thing from our food group, or from our like daily activity?
I would say, I think for us, especially for Bengalis, right, rice is a big thing, right? So especially like white rice, you can substitute like brown rice. I know it may not always be as tasty, and maybe you could slowly like cut it out. So if you're whatever amount of rice you're eating, instead of eating the full amount, have like 3/4 of it or 2/3 of it, right, and slowly like go down. You don't need as much, and try to supplement it with instead of having so much carbs, put in like lean meats, like a lot of like chicken. Uh, will like protein will make you feel more full and give you like lasting energy throughout the day. So that's one of the things that I guess we could do. Cut out some of the red meat and put in lean meat, and cut out rice like slowly. There was one doctor. He's actually from like the neighborhood, and he actually works at downstate. He there was someone that came up to him in like the mosque, and he's like, "Oh, doctor, I just have like this big gut or whatever." He's like an older Bengali guy came up to him. He's like, "Yeah, I got this big gut. What should I do? Give me some advice. Like, what do I do?" And then the doctor tells him, he's like, "Listen, I could tell you to go on like these crazy diets, these like trendy things, but you being who you are, I don't know if you can, handle this, right?" And then he just told him, he's like, "Listen, just cut down your portions. That's all. Just even if whatever you're eating, if you can't, stop eating a particular thing, just cut your portions down. Eat like 3/4 or 2/3 of whatever it is that you're already eating. Cut the calories down, and you should get better with time." It was funny. The guy said, "Well, it's reasonable," but then he's like, "But man, okay, so what? Like, you want me to do this? Nah, man. I'd rather just live than die of starvation or whatever." Like, just like, but if you say it to a guy, it's more funny. Like you said,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you mean.
yeah, it was hilarious. But yeah, man, it just comes down to like, who you are. And I think cutting portions is like the biggest step that you could take. Just cut down like how much you eat at once.
One trick that I was watching a video, and he was just I was watching another podcast, and he mentioned this tip where he tricked himself into eating like smaller iftars during Ramadan by just getting a smaller plate and eating everything on that small plate.
Mhm.
Because whereas like if you have a big plate, you can tell yourself that I'll only eat this much, but then like I don't know, psychologically you might be like, oh, it was only a little, so let me like add more, and like one thing leads to another. But let's say you have like a small plate, then you're like, well, I had a whole plate, and like you can kind of trick your brain like that.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a good strategy. If it works for you, it works for you, man.
Yeah. I was uh I was watching something on Japan, because I'm just like I was going through some Japan interesting things, right? And one thing that I learned is that like a third of their population is always on a diet,
Oh, wow.
like which is crazy compared to like the US, where I don't know the statistics, but it's definitely a lot less than that, right?
Yeah.
And they don't have an obesity problem whatsoever. And there's a bunch of things that go into like they walk a lot more because public transportation isn't as like readily available. So
Yeah.
they walk a ton. Um, what's really interesting is that apparently eating out is a lot cheaper than cooking your own food, and yet people are still not like getting obese because of it. And
So,
that's be
so they are eating out more
yeah,
because it's cheaper, but they're not getting, I see.
yeah, because I think it has to do with a variety of factors. One being that Japanese chefs, they seem like, culturally speaking, I guess food is very important. Like
Yeah.
they probably put a lot of care into their food, not just like slopping it on like greasy like
Yeah.
fryers and stuff like that. So they treat like they handle their food with care.
Mhm.
And two, just like the smaller portions, like
Yeah.
they're not really putting in like a Big Mac sized burger on top of a plate right in front of you, right? uh, yeah, it was really interesting. And what's really crazy is that at supermarkets, if you were to buy like fruits individually, that would
Mhm.
actually be a lot more expensive than you getting like a dish with that like ingredient in it at another restaurant. It was just like, what is the purpose of that in the economy? But I don't know the economic side of it, like, but it was just like super cool that they eat out a ton and yet they're still pretty fit and healthy.
Wow, that's interesting. I want to visit. I want to actually visit Japan at some point in Tokyo. That's one of the places I've been planning on. You know, it's interesting. I was in talking about visiting like places. Uh, like 2 years ago, I went to Turkey. That was the beginning of 2019. I went to Turkey, and then I had some friends that were with me, and they were like, "Yeah, man, the Burger King and like the McDonald's and stuff, the stuff's halal, man. Let's go, let's eat, right?" So like we went to this one place, and we actually got McDonald's, right? And it was interesting because we were eating like I think they got like a Big Mac or something like that, but the patties look like like half as thick as they are like here, like or like as I would imagine them being here, right? Like as you see them in like the advertisements, and
Hmm.
just noticed that it was just like thinner, and we didn't like understand why, and we were like maybe that's why. Like in that country, I didn't actually see that many obese people. Everyone is kind of like normal. It was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think enough people know that they are overweight, because they get like very surprised when like me or like one of my coworkers, they like we take their weight, and then they're just like, wait, seriously, like my BMI is that much? And they're just like surprised because they may think of themselves like, well, I don't look too fat, but there's
Yeah,
and I know like BMI isn't like the most like accurate representation of health, but
it's still
um
medically like we still use it. You know what I'm saying? Unless like someone obviously looks like completely like muscular, like or something. Um, but yeah,
so it's like a good starting place to at least like just check on your weight to like height ratio.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. um so you are a doctor, you are a YouTuber, I guess, at this point. And from from your banner, you said you also wanted to make like investing videos, right, with some kind of financial
yeah.
like finance advising type videos for like the medical community, right?
Yeah.
uh how'd you get into that? Like what sparked interest into like that sector of your passions?
So that's something that's been somewhat like at this point like very deep rooted inside of me where I started during like the third year of my medical school, there's just one book that I read. It's called the White Coat Investor. It's written by an emergency medicine physician from Utah, and he sort of went through his journey as to how he paid off his loans and developed his assets and eventually became a millionaire by the age of somewhere in his mid like 30s. But when you say the word millionaire, like everyone imagines like someone driving like a Lamborghini and like private jets and all that. But in all honesty, being a millionaire does not mean that you're gonna look like that. Like $1 million is not that much money if you think about it. Like it just means that
Yeah, no, in New York it's a house. That's it.
so it's not a lot of money, but it is something. It is a point to get to. I mean, I don't think like, his life is like super lavish, but he does have some luxuries. That's beyond the point. But his book had a lot to do with like what medical students, residents, and attending physicians can do to sort of improve themselves financially and better educate themselves from a financial standpoint. Because we go through all this training, this medical training, and you know, we're plunged into like, medicine, and we're always reading about medicine and learning and just developing throughout our careers. But sometimes we lack understanding our own finances and how to manage our money. And that's something you're not taught in medical school. That's something you're not even taught in the schooling system in the United States. And I find that absurd, right? Think about it. Like, you're not taught anything about money ever. Like, when did anyone teach you anything about money in elementary school, middle school, like high
There
school?
was there was one economics class.
Economics class, right? But it had nothing to do with personal finance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was like on a macro scale instead.
Exactly. So you expect everyone. I have my issues with the American schooling system. There's good things about it, but there's some problems with it, right? So you go through all this schooling, you come out of college, you're expected to get a job and manage your finances and develop create assets and like move forward and become financially successful and financially independent in the U.S., which is a very like a capitalistic society. But you're not taught anything about this in school. You go through all this training and you don't learn anything about money, like nothing. Like you don't learn anything about how to invest, none of these sorts of things. And like I realized this about myself. I was like, hey, like I never learned this like in school, nor did anyone else really teach me. I have to actually like pick up some books and like learn this stuff, whenever I have time. And so that was the first book that I started with. The White Coat Investor, and there are several other books that I read after that, but it's still a process for my own self. And many of like the ideas that I get are from that book, and he has like a forum from there, and some of the other experiences I've had like with time. And it's important to invest. You're living in the U.S. You're going to grow old at some point. You're not going to work. You should have a plan for how you're going to invest your money and how you're going to reap the profits when you get older. Because the way you work when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you're not going to be able to work like that when you're.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't even matter how professional your job is. Like you just can't.
Yeah, I mean, I started to get sort of into it. I haven't really like done much with it. Like I made a Robinhood account and I put like some money into like certain sectors. Um, but yeah, I haven't done too much, but it's something that I definitely do want to like look into more and definitely like keep gaining knowledge on, because it just seems like common sense. Like you're building assets for your future. Like 20 years from now, you can actually live comfortably, right? You're not going to be the same healthy person that you were,
Yeah.
when you're older. Do you have any future videos like specifically in mind, like regarding any topics in the financial side of things?
I was thinking, and this may not come anytime. Like I'm still like I want to like formulate it out well, but I was thinking about creating something regarding just uh, investment accounts and like retirement accounts. Like one of the things I learned like very recently what a Roth IRA is and what like a traditional versus Roth IRA and all these things. Like these are things I never like knew before. So these are some of the things that I want to start like talking about because I think it's important. I think like for our community with a lot of our guys that we know who just start working, it's important for them to understand that at some point they should consider, even when you're young, maybe to start a retirement account if that's going to generate profit for you, that's gonna give you some money in the long term. So it's something important. I think everyone should be taught. Should be taught about personal finance. Should be taught about these things in high school, at least. By that time,
Hmm.
like have some sense of these sorts of things. But we don't get it, and so it's important for other people to do it and put it out in other platforms, whether it's YouTube, books, blogs, forums, whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly said, man. And I think it's it's very like, I don't know, it's like a sign of things when someone like that went through that whole system and that kind of hit like the peak of like maybe not the peak of success, but like the doctor is such a model thing to be, right? And it's very cool to see someone like you who has gone through that whole thing and has like attained prestige, critique that same model that that allowed you to get to that point. Because I guess people that um, who might get on their high horse, they might like look back and say, well, I succeeded, right? But it takes a lot to say that, well, yeah, I went through it, but there was still like a ton of things wrong with the track that we were on,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's important to keep
You
your
know,
eyes open. Go
yeah.
ahead.
uh so I do definitely want to wrap up. Like it's
Sure.
pretty late right now. It's like 11:30, and I'm sure that you want to like spend time with your family, like after like not seeing them for 65 hours out of the week. So I'll end on this one question.
Yeah.
Being in such a rigorous career field and also doing things on the side like finance and like your own creative like side of things, it seems like you have a lot of insight in how to be productive with your time, right? I'm starting to get there, but I'm still doing like a lot of things wrong. What is
Yeah.
one tip you could give me and like other people like around my age, like late teens, 20s, on how to truly make use of their time, how to be productive, and how to build habits so that they can so that they can continue doing those for the next 5-10 years.
Okay. So I'll share two things. I'm not the most productive person like out there, and I want to be more productive. Um, so the first thing is going to be the hard thing, and then the second thing will be like an easier tip. So the harder tip is if you wake up early, right? If you have to go to school at 8 o'clock, right? Wake up at like 5 in the morning, try to go to sleep like a little bit earlier, or do it your first day where you just wake up at 5 and you'll feel sleepy enough to go to sleep like really early, that night. Um, and get whatever you want to get done very early in the morning when there's no distractions, nobody messing with you. You don't have to like, you can get up, refresh, use a bathroom, kind of just sit down, have a little breakfast, and just take care of in those first 2 hours or so. Just take care of whatever it is that's like high priority on your mind or something that you haven't been able to get to, right? If that can be implemented on a continuous basis, you can be super super productive with those morning hours, and it's just literally like 2 hours like early in the morning without any distractions, because you get tired later on in the day, even after school, after work, you're tired, you can't focus on things. But it is hard to implement, and to do it consistently, it's hard. So that's the hard tip. And the second tip, something a little bit easier to do, and one of the things like I developed throughout medical school and into residency is whenever you have some idle time, right? Like say you're standing in line for something, right? And you're not doing anything. Um, yeah, so you're standing in line kind of situation, or in a waiting room, waiting to for whatever reason, in an office, you're waiting for something, right? We all have phones. Um, so one of the things I do for myself, and a lot of people, we tend to just go onto social media, like flip through our phone, do something that's not really productive. Instead of going onto social media, use your phone to learn something new that's related to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's your career, school, like read an article about something. I like to do questions, a lot of medical like related questions during that time. In a line, like I remember like last week, I was just standing in line for like this store. They had like a line outside, and I got through like maybe like 5, 6 questions, and I learned a couple new things. So use that idle time so that it doesn't really feel like like you're taking away from other things throughout the day.
Wow,
That's what.
those are pretty like, I guess those are pretty like straightforward things to do, but it definitely is a lot of work to actually implement them. Like the waking
Mhm.
up early thing, I'm having such trouble with that. Like because
Fun.
I sleep at terrible hours, so it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very hard to do, but taking advantage of idle time is probably one of
Mhm.
the it's very effective if it's done consistently.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, that was again nicely said, Minhaz. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. I know that we've been trying to do this for a few weeks, and like it's always been like your busy schedule that's been in the way, and that I'm truly like grateful that you finally did find the time and we did have this sit down. And yeah, the amazing thing about this is that I can actually catch up with people that I've been wanting to talk to for a while, and now I just have an excuse to. So yeah, like you don't live here in the neighborhood anymore, so it's been like amazing to just catch up like this.
Yeah, man. Of course. It feels good, man. I haven't seen you in such a long time, bro.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys continue to tune in. We're gonna have amazing guests every single week, just like I said. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and hope you come back for every episode. Have a nice day, guys.